Hello and welcome to another video. So this morning I am working the washes once again. I think I'm going to spend the entire trip down here, to be honest. Now I'm in a section where it was green when I first came through here a couple of videos ago, handful of videos ago. There was some yellows, it was mostly green, but now it's starting to turn. It's pretty good color. So it seems like yellow is the theme this year. Yellow is pretty predominant. Most of the leaves I'm seeing on the ground are yellow or orange. Which tells me that they're not making it all the way to red before they fall off. Which is great because previous years, I didn't really have so much yellow. I mean, little splashes here and there, but it was a lot of reds and oranges. It's kind of nice to have a little different color palette to work with. Now I've come across a scene that I've set up on that has got a bunch of boulders in the foreground, kind of leads up into a tree that's leafed out a little bit. There's quite a few leaves on the ground, but there's still a few in the branches. But it's kind of looking up underneath the tree, the one that's right behind me here. There's no reflected light or anything. It's just kind of sky color coming through the leaves that's lighting them up and making them kind of almost iridescent. It's kind of cool looking. The reason that looks that way is because it's up against a really dark background with like mosses and stuff like that. So really bright subject, really dark background. And then the stack of boulders in the foreground, I'm hoping kind of lead for some foreground interest leading up into it. There's lots of mosses and fallen leaves on the foreground too. So I think it makes for a really pretty scene. So I've set up the camera. I had to set the tripod up pretty high. I had to stand on a rock in the wash here in order to be able to see the ground glass because it's, you can see how much higher it is than my head. Part of that is because looking up, I was getting sky in the frame and I didn't want that. So if I bring the camera up and looking down, it kind of keeps that out of the photograph. And then I did use a little bit of rear tilt on this one to kind of exaggerate the tree because I wanted the tree to be a little more dominant, or at least even, with the stack of boulders in the foreground as far as, compositional real estate. So by using rear tilt, I've kind of exaggerated the tree in the top of the frame in order to kind of like achieve a better balance, I think. And I framed this up with my Nikon 150 f5.6, shooting at f32. And I shot 2 sheets of Velvia 50. Been shooting a lot of Velvia this trip, almost entirely. I actually might have shot Provia on this one, except I didn't load any last night, so I don't have any in my film holders. So Velvia it is. It's already a really contrasty scene, so I'm debating on whether or not to shoot a color negative too, just in case, because there are parts of it that are gonna probably go pretty black. But I'm thinking it might be desirable in this case because I kind of want the leaves to really pop out. I didn't have to add anything for bellows extension, so nothing there, but with Velvia's reciprocity failure characteristics, that made my exposure time 26 seconds at 32. First exposure had just a little bit of motion blur. On one branch in the background, the breeze was moving in a little bit during the exposure. I don't think it was too bad, but then the second exposure was absolutely still in here. It's beautiful. Other than the sound of the traffic on the road above me, you can probably hear. It's absolutely gorgeous in this wash this morning. It's beautiful.
Well, like a lot of my images from Zion this year, it's pretty blue. Probably should have used a warming filter. But I think the image is exposed well otherwise. The mosses back here look like they're pulling in a little more sky color than I would have preferred. Probably would have been better if I'd used my polarizer on this one, maybe. Not sure. Maybe some of that sky color would have been knocked off. As far as saturation goes, I think it's okay other than the blue cast. Like the greens look fine. The yellows look pretty natural, actually, I think. The leaf layer looks good. It's just pulling too much sky color. And that's something I've learned as I've gone looking at all these images that, it's been pretty hammered into my mind now that I need to pay attention to that in shade with Velvia. I don't think I had as much of a problem with this in the past, shooting the redwoods, for example, with Velvia, because, I didn't have bright blue sky above me. I was in a tree canopy, so I didn't have to worry about it reflecting so much blue color from the sky. But this has been a real eye-opening lesson for me, just realizing that I for sure need to pay attention to that here when I do have, big open sky above me. So unfortunately, like a lot of the images this trip, I'll have to warm this up in post. But I like the composition. I think it's beautiful. The tree was gorgeous standing here. And I think all these rocks, like in the foreground, really make for an interesting foreground. I think the choice to go vertical on this was a good one too, because I think the sides of the composition and the wash itself just didn't really have quite as much interesting stuff. So it cuts off the tree a little bit here, but I think overall I'm happy with the decision I made. Now this is centered. The tree is very centered here, and I was trying to use the rocks to kind of like guide your eye up into the, not really lead-in lines, but more like just a bunch of angles pointing at the tree that I was trying to use as the main feature. I think that works pretty good. Even like the mosses here, that kind of, form an arrowhead a little bit. So I think compositionally I made good choices here. Pretty happy with that. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And then what I didn't show in the field is I had identified a second composition on the same subject. So you can call this a bit of a study or however you want to call it. And I decided to shoot with my wide angle 75. Instead of shooting direct on, rotated to the right just a little bit and shot it with a wider angle at 75 millimeters. And this is that. One thing I noticed right off the bat, other than the same blue cast, this one's a little too bright. This one's better. And I was really worried about this dark spot right here. But I think it actually turned out pretty good. Yeah, there's detail in there still. It's very sharp all the way in the foreground. It's a pretty wide angle lens, so that should be pretty easy to accomplish. It's a little bit of motion blur up here on the top left corner. It's very slight though, so I don't think I'm too worried about it. I'm gonna probably go with this image just because the exposure is better. This foreground rock is even more of an arrowhead here pointing up towards the composition. And I like the leaf litter, just a very sparse leaf litter that's on the top of this rock, as well as the mosses here. I think all of the leaf litter works really well in this image. One thing I am really happy to see though, and it was kind of the main thing I wanted to get out of this composition, is to see this on the light table, because it was really dark on the ground glass, and being that wide angle of a lens, I was concerned about vignetting. But from what I see, there might be, it looks like, I don't know. I can't see enough vignetting here to be concerned about it, put it that way. Some of these super wide angle lenses, and this one's not super, super wide, but 75 is pretty wide for a large format. Some of these lenses require center ND because there's so much vignetting that you have to compensate for that somehow, and using a center ND is one way to balance it out so that it isn't quite so bad. My 90 millimeter Nikon doesn't require one. It does just fine. I was a little concerned about this Fujinon 75 millimeter lens, and especially was seen as dark as it was on the ground glass. I was like, oh boy, those edges look really dark. But I'm pretty pleased to see that it doesn't appear to require one. If there is any vignetting, it isn't strong enough for me to be concerned about it. And that's great, because center NDs are not cheap and they're not easy to find. So I'm not sure yet if I like this 75 millimeter composition or if I like the original one better. But I think my initial gut reaction is to go with this one, this original composition. I think it's a little stronger. This one's cool, but I like the way the tree fills the upper half of the composition on this one a little more. That's my first reaction, but this is the first time seeing the film, but that's what I'm thinking. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Here are both of these final images back to back. You let me know down in the comments which one you like better. Curious to hear your thoughts.
So I've come up on this corner of the wash where this maple tree's dropped a bunch of its leaves down on the rocks next to the base of the tree. After that storm passed through, this has kind of been a common thing that I've been keeping an eye out for. It's just piles of, good looking leaves. This one's kind of more orangish tones. It's got some yellows in there, but there is some more orange and reddish tones in here. So it's kind of a nice mixed bag. So I've set up on it. I'm shooting straight down at the ground with my 300mm lens, and I had to use a lot of bellows extension for this one to focus that 300 all the way down on the ground. So I ended up having to add an entire stop of light for a bellows extension factor. But it's a good looking pile of leaves. Some of these trees you run up on, they're kind of haggard looking leaves that are all piled up on here. But this one actually looks pretty clean. But I did do some scene cleanup. There was a couple of leaves that were really damaged that I just pulled out of there, just got rid of them. But what attracted me to this is there's one predominant yellowish orange maple leaf kind of in the center, and I've kind of arranged my camera so that I can line that one up straight in the center of the composition, and the rest is just a bed of leaves around it. There is one white rock kind of poking through in the bottom left-hand corner, but I think I'm okay with that. Just a little bit of interest, I guess. Now the camera's in the tree, so I've been inadvertently knocking leaves off of the tree, and they've been landing in the composition as I was framing it. But because I'm kind of up against these tree limbs, I couldn't necessarily shoot directly straight down, otherwise I would have been a face full of leaves. So I shot at a slight angle and had to use a little bit of front tilt to accommodate for the shift and plane of focus. Now, I do have some reflected light coming in the scene, which is helping me out, helping warm the scene up quite a bit. I shot 2 sheets of Velvia 50. The first sheet was 37 seconds at f/64. This lens goes all the way to f/90. Now the second sheet, I shot backups, but the second sheet I took the equivalent exposure at f/45. So that was 15 seconds after counting for reciprocity and bellows extension. The reason I did that is because I'm kind of curious just to have back-to-back exposures to see if diffraction really is a problem and how bad it is at f/64 versus f/45. But I really wanted the depth of field on this because I'm focused so close, and there is, varying layers of leaves in here, and I want them as sharp as I can get them. So that'll be kind of interesting. That's just for me a little bit of an experiment to see how bad diffraction really is, or if it even is a problem. So that's that. It's a beautiful scene. The storm came through and kind of wrecked a bunch of compositions for me and kind of threw me off balance. I had to get back on my feet and start finding compositions again. But fortunately, it created these kind of opportunities for me. So it took some away and it gave some in return. So I think it's all good. It's a beautiful scene. Happy to photograph it.
So as far as leaf litter goes, I thought this was a pretty awesome patch. So I did take a second exposure, a little darker, just slightly brighter. That looks more correct. That looks like a pretty correct exposure. Absolutely tack sharp again. Really stoked about that. This exposure is a lot better than the other one. It's probably about a third stop difference, which isn't a lot. It doesn't sound like a lot. On color negative film, I wouldn't hardly be able to tell that, but on Velvia, it's pretty pronounced. So it looks like this will be the exposure. It's not quite as blue either, of course, because it's exposed a little better. Being underexposed, of course, you get color cast when you don't expose correctly. So it makes sense that this is slightly better. Still a little cool, but my intention was to get your eye to kind of go straight to this one maple leaf in the center. That was the whole reason why I adjusted the camera to where it was. It's to center that one leaf. And that's actually why I just decided to go ahead and deal with the rock being in it too. Although I kind of like the rock being there, but at the time I was thinking, I don't really want to include that, but I wanted to center this leaf. So I kind of had to make a compromise there, and I think it worked out because I actually like the rock in there. Although some of these upside down leaves, the undersides are brighter than the more colorful side, right? So I'm not sure how I feel about it yet because it seems that they might be just a little distracting. So I might have to burn them down a little bit. It's not like I was going to go flip all of these the right side up, it'd be so contrived if you did that. But I do like the range of colors and the tones and stuff as a result because some of them are right side, some are upside down. Some of them are just a little bright, but I think I can deal with it. Yeah, really happy with that one. Let me know what you think. Thanks as always for watching this week's video, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, you can let me know by hitting that thumbs up button down below. And if you haven't already, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button while you're down there. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next episode.